The galaxy was a big place, full of stars, planets, and secrets. But even in such a vast universe, news traveled fast when there was money to be made. A mining colony on the edge of known space had been taken over by unknown forces, and a rich corporate syndicate was offering a huge reward to anyone who could retake it. The job sounded simple enough. Go in, clear out the hostiles, and collect the paycheck. It was the kind of mission mercenaries lived for. Jack Monroe was one of those mercenaries. He had spent years working as a hired gun, traveling from one dangerous job to the next. His face was weathered, his body marked with scars from battles he'd rather forget. But Jack wasn't the type to dwell on the past. He lived for the present and the promise of credits that came with every successful mission. This time, though, he decided not to go alone. He gathered a small team of trusted fighters, each with their own skills and reasons for joining. Lena Hayes was the first to sign up. She was a sharpshooter with a steady hand and nerves of steel. Her long brown hair was usually tied back, and her green eyes missed nothing. Next was Marcus Doyle, a big man with a booming laugh and fists like hammers. He specialized in close-quarters combat and wasn't afraid to charge headfirst into danger. Finally, there was Rachel Blake, the tech expert of the group. Quiet and reserved, she preferred machines to people but could hack through any system faster than anyone Jack had ever met. The four of them boarded their old transport ship, a beat-up vessel that had seen better days but still got the job done. As they set course for the mining colony, Jack reviewed the details of the mission. The outpost was located on a barren moon, far from the usual trade routes. According to the syndicate, the colony had been overrun by hostile forces, though no one seemed to know exactly who or what they were. That lack of information made Jack uneasy, but he pushed the feeling aside. They'd faced worse odds before, and they'd always come out on top. When they arrived at the colony, the scene was grim. The facility looked abandoned, its metal walls rusted and battered. The airlock creaked open as they stepped inside, their boots crunching on broken glass and debris. The power was out, leaving the corridors dark and silent except for the hum of distant machinery. Jack signaled for the others to stay alert. Something about this place didn't feel right. As they moved deeper into the compound, the signs of violence became harder to ignore. Scorch marks marred the walls, and shattered control panels littered the floor. In one room, they found a pool of dried blood near an overturned table. "Looks like whoever was here didn't stand a chance," Marcus muttered, his voice low. It wasn't until they reached the security station that things started to make sense, or at least less sense than before. Rachel plugged her tablet into the mainframe and pulled up the last recorded footage. What they saw chilled them to the bone. Black armored figures moved through the halls with terrifying efficiency. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated to be ordinary soldiers. One of them paused in front of a camera, tilting their head as if aware they were being watched. Then the screen went black. "That's not normal," Rachel said, her voice trembling slightly. "Whatever these things are, they're not human." Jack clenched his jaw. He had a bad feeling about this mission now, but it was too late to turn back. They had taken the job, and they would see it through, no matter what waited for them in the shadows. The second day on the mining colony was even worse than the first. The silence that hung over the facility was oppressive, broken only by the occasional groan of metal as the structure shifted in the low gravity. Jack and his team moved cautiously through the darkened halls, their flashlights cutting narrow beams through the gloom. They had decided to split up temporarily to cover more ground, searching for supplies or anything that might give them a clue about the enemy they were up against. Lena stayed close to Jack, her rifle at the ready. She didn't like splitting up any more than he did, but they needed answers, and fast. Marcus and Rachel had taken a different route, heading toward what appeared to be a storage bay on the map. The plan was simple: gather whatever they could find and regroup within an hour. But plans often fell apart when you least expected it. Jack and Lena reached the cafeteria first. The room was a mess, with overturned tables and chairs scattered across the floor. Empty food packets lay strewn about, some half-eaten, as if the workers had fled in a hurry. Jack knelt beside one of the tables, examining a smear of dried blood on its surface. "Whoever these people were," he said quietly, "they didn't go down without a fight." Before Lena could respond, a loud crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the facility. It sounded like metal hitting metal, followed by the unmistakable hiss of hydraulic systems. Jack signaled for Lena to stay low as they crept toward the source of the noise. His heart pounded in his chest, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But they couldn't afford to hesitate, not if they wanted to survive this place. They found the storage bay just as Marcus and Rachel were backing out of it, their faces pale with fear. "We've got company," Marcus growled, clutching his weapon tightly. Behind him, several figures emerged from the shadows. They wore sleek black armor that seemed to absorb the light, making them look almost invisible in the dimness. Their movements were unnervingly smooth, like predators stalking prey. "Deathworlders," Rachel whispered, her voice shaking. "It has to be." Jack raised his rifle, aiming at the nearest figure. "Don't let them get close," he shouted, firing off a burst of shots. The bullets struck the lead Deathworlder squarely in the chest, but instead of collapsing, the figure barely flinched. Its head tilted slightly, as if analyzing the attack, before it surged forward with terrifying speed. The battle was chaos. Marcus charged forward, swinging his massive fists in wide arcs, trying to keep the enemy at bay. Lena fired shot after shot, her aim steady despite the panic rising in her chest. Rachel crouched behind a pile of crates, frantically working on her tablet to disable the automated doors and trap the Deathworlders inside. For a moment, it looked like they might actually hold their ground. But then everything went wrong. One of the Deathworlders leaped onto Marcus, pinning him to the ground with unnatural strength. Before anyone could react, the creature's armored gauntlet drove into Marcus's chest, silencing his cries forever. Lena screamed his name, firing wildly in a desperate attempt to drive the attackers back. Another Deathworlder grabbed her leg, yanking her off balance. She fell hard, pain shooting through her body as she hit the ground. Jack saw red. He abandoned his position and ran toward Lena, tackling the Deathworlder that held her captive. Together, they managed to break free, but not without cost. Lena's leg was badly injured, and she could barely walk. As the remaining Deathworlders closed in, Rachel made a split-second decision. She hurled a grenade at the advancing figures, creating a smoke screen that gave the survivors a chance to escape. Dragging Lena to safety, Jack glanced back at the storage bay one last time. Through the haze of smoke, he saw the Deathworlders standing motionless, watching them retreat. There was no pursuit, no final push to finish them off, just those cold, calculating stares. As they limped away, Jack realized something important. The Deathworlders weren't just soldiers. They were hunters. And now, they knew exactly who they were dealing with. With Marcus dead and Lena badly injured, the group retreated to a secure room deep within the mining facility. It was one of the few areas that still had power, its heavy metal door providing some semblance of safety. Jack locked it behind them and quickly set up a makeshift barricade using crates and debris. The room wasn't much, a small office with a broken desk, a flickering monitor, and a single chair, but it would have to do. Lena sat on the cold floor, clutching her leg. Blood seeped through her fingers, staining her gloves and the fabric of her pants. Rachel knelt beside her, pulling out a medkit from her backpack. "This is going to hurt," she said softly, examining the wound. Lena nodded, gritting her teeth as Rachel cleaned and bandaged it as best she could. The injury was serious, but at least it wasn't life-threatening. For now. Jack paced back and forth, his mind racing. They had lost Marcus, one of their strongest fighters, in a matter of seconds. The Deathworlders were unlike anything he'd ever faced before. Their armor seemed impenetrable, their movements precise and efficient. Every shot fired at them had been useless, Every attempt to fight back met with overwhelming force. For the first time in his career, Jack felt truly outmatched. "We need to figure out what we're dealing with," he said finally, stopping in front of the old monitor. He powered it on, the screen flickering to life after a few moments. The system was outdated, but it still held fragments of data from the colony's operations. Jack began sifting through files, looking for anything that might explain who, or what, the Deathworlders were. Rachel joined him, her hands flying over the keyboard as she hacked into restricted directories. "There's something here," she murmured, pulling up a classified document. It was labeled Project Harvester, and the contents sent a chill down her spine. According to the file, the Deathworlders weren't just soldiers. They were engineered beings, created on a planet known for its brutal environment. This world, nicknamed Deathworld by those unlucky enough to visit it, was home to creatures so deadly that only the strongest could survive. The Syndicate had captured some of these survivors and subjected them to genetic modifications, turning them into perfect killing machines. "They're not human," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. "They were bred to adapt to any situation, to eliminate threats without hesitation. That's why they're so hard to kill." Jack stared at the screen, absorbing the information. It made sense now. Their speed, their resilience, their eerie coordination. These weren't ordinary enemies. They were monsters crafted by science. And worse, they were tools of the same corporate syndicate that had hired Jack's team. "We've been played," he muttered, anger rising in his chest. "The syndicate sent us here knowing full well we wouldn't stand a chance." Lena looked up, her face pale but determined. "So what do? We can't fight them head-on. If we try, we'll end up like Marcus." Jack didn't answer right away. He leaned against the desk, thinking hard. There had to be a way to turn the tide, even if it meant taking risks. The facility was old and falling apart, filled with hazards that could work to their advantage. Explosives, gas lines, unstable machinery. All of it could be used to slow the Deathworlders down, maybe even take some of them out. "We set traps," he said finally, turning to face the others. "We lure them into areas we can control and hit them where it hurts. It's our only chance." Rachel frowned. "And then what? Even if we manage to take out a few of them, there are probably more waiting. We can't win this fight, Jack." "I know," he admitted, his voice heavy with resignation. "But we don't have to win. We just have to survive long enough to find a way out of here." The plan was risky, but none of them had a better idea. Rachel went to work rigging explosives throughout the facility while Jack helped Lena stay mobile despite her injury. As they prepared, the weight of their situation pressed down on all of them. The Deathworlders were coming. They always came. And when they did, the mercenaries would have to be ready, or die trying. The plan was set, but none of them felt confident about it. Jack, Lena, and Rachel moved carefully through the darkened halls of the mining facility, planting explosives in key locations. The air was thick with tension, every sound making them jump. They knew the Deathworlders were still out there, watching, waiting. It was only a matter of time before they struck again. Rachel worked quickly, her hands steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. She had rigged the explosives to trigger remotely, hoping to catch the enemy off guard. "This is our best shot," she said as she finished setting up the last charge. "If we can funnel them into these corridors, we might be able to take out a few of them." Jack nodded, though he wasn't convinced it would work. He carried Lena on his back, since she couldn't walk on her own. Her leg throbbed with pain, but she tried not to complain. "We just need to buy ourselves some time," she said weakly. "Maybe long enough to find a way out." But deep down, all of them knew the odds were against them. The Deathworlders weren't just fast and strong. They were smart. Too smart. Every move the mercenaries made seemed predictable, like the enemy already knew their next step. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into another trap. They returned to the secure room and waited. Minutes passed, feeling more like ours. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the faint hum of the facility's failing systems. Then finally, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor. Heavy, deliberate, and impossible to mistake. "They're here," Jack whispered, gripping his rifle tightly. His finger hovered over the detonator for the explosives. Lena leaned against the wall, clutching a pistol in one hand. Rachel crouched near the door, ready to hack into the security system if needed. None of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. The door burst open with a deafening crash, sending shards of metal flying across the room. 3 Deathworlders stormed in, their black armor gleaming in the dim light. Jack pressed the detonator without hesitation. Explosions rocked the facility, shaking the walls and filling the air with smoke and dust. For a moment, chaos reigned. When the smoke cleared, 2 of the Deathworlders lay motionless on the floor, their armor cracked and charred. But the third one stood tall, unharmed. It tilted its head, studying the survivors with cold indifference. Then, without warning, it lunged forward, faster than anyone could react. Rachel screamed and threw herself in front of Jack, taking the full force of the attack. The Deathworlder's armored fist slammed into her chest, knocking her to the ground. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth as she struggled to breathe. "Run," she gasped, reaching for the grenade strapped to her belt. With the last of her strength, she pulled the pin and rolled toward the enemy. "Rachel, no," Jack shouted, grabbing Lena and pulling her away just as the grenade exploded. The blast tore through the room, engulfing the Deathworlder in flames. When the dust settled, the creature was gone, or so it seemed. Lena coughed, her eyes watering from the smoke. Is it over?" she asked hoarsely. Jack didn't answer. He scanned the wreckage, his heart pounding. Something about the scene felt wrong. Too quiet, too easy. And then he saw it, a shadow moving in the corner of the room. The Deathworlder emerged from the debris, its armor scorched but intact. It stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate, like a predator savoring the hunt. "We can't win this," Lena whispered, her voice trembling. "It's over." Jack tightened his grip on his rifle, even though he knew it wouldn't make a difference. The Deathworlder stopped a few feet away, raising its hand as if to strike. But instead of attacking, it paused, tilting its head as if listening to something. A low-frequency hum filled the room, growing louder with each passing second. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the Deathworlder turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. For a moment, Jack and Lena sat in stunned silence. What had just happened? Had they been spared? Or was this just another part of the enemy's plan? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. They weren't safe yet. Not by a long shot. Jack and Lena sat in stunned silence, their ears ringing from the explosion. The room was a mess of twisted metal and smoke, but the immediate danger seemed to have passed for now. Rachel's sacrifice had bought them a little time. Though neither of them felt relief, her final act of bravery weighed heavily on their minds. "We need to move," Jack said finally, his voice rough with emotion. He helped Lena to her feet, ignoring the protests of his own weary body. They couldn't afford to stay in one place for long. The Deathworlders were unpredictable, and even though one had walked away moments ago, there could be more nearby. Lena leaned on Jack for support, her injured leg dragging slightly as they limped out of the ruined room. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice weak but steady. She was trying to stay strong, but the toll of everything they'd been through was evident in her pale face and trembling hands. "To the generator room," Jack replied. "If we can shut down the power, it might slow them down. Maybe even give us a chance to escape." The idea wasn't perfect, but it was all they had left. The facility's layout was etched into Jack's memory from the maps he'd studied earlier. If they moved quickly and quietly, they might be able to reach the generator without running into more Deathworlders. At least, that was the hope. The journey through the darkened halls felt like an eternity. Every step echoed loudly. Every shadow seemed to shift unnaturally. Jack kept his rifle raised, scanning the area constantly. Lena stayed close, her pistol gripped tightly in one hand. Neither of them spoke. Words felt useless at this point. All that mattered was survival. When they reached the generator room, Jack eased the door open carefully, checking for any signs of movement inside. The space was large, filled with rows of humming machinery and tangled wires. A single control panel stood near the center, its blinking lights casting an eerie glow across the walls. It looked untouched, which meant the Deathworlders hadn't gotten to it yet. Or so they hoped. "Guard the door while I work," Jack instructed, handing Lena an extra magazine for her pistol. She nodded and took position by the entrance, keeping watch as he approached the control panel. His fingers flew over the keys, bypassing security protocols and initiating a shutdown sequence. The hum of the generators began to fade, plunging the room, and much of the facility, into darkness. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, and far too close for comfort. "They're here," Lena whispered, her voice shaking. She aimed her pistol toward the doorway, squinting into the shadows. Jack abandoned the panel and grabbed his rifle, moving to stand beside her. Together, they braced themselves for what was coming next. The first Deathworlder appeared in the doorway, its silhouette outlined faintly by the dim emergency lighting. Behind it came two more, their black armor blending seamlessly with the darkness. They didn't rush forward this time. Instead, they advanced slowly, methodically, like hunters cornering their prey. Jack fired a burst of shots, aiming for the lead figure. The bullets sparked harmlessly against its armor. Lena followed up with a shot of her own, but it had no effect either. The Deathworlders kept coming, closing the distance with each passing second. "There's no way out," Lena muttered, lowering her weapon slightly. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "We're not going to make it." Jack hesitated, his mind racing. He glanced around the room, searching for anything they could use to their advantage. That's when he noticed it. A cluster of fuel tanks near the back wall. If he could detonate them, it might take out the Deathworlders, or at least create enough chaos to allow him and Lena to slip away. "I'll hold them off," he told her, his voice firm despite the fear clawing at his chest. "Get behind those crates and stay low." Lena shook her head. "No, we do this together." Before Jack could argue, the Deathworlders charged. He pulled the pin on a grenade and hurled it toward the fuel tanks, then grabbed Lena and dove behind cover. The explosion was deafening, shaking the entire room and sending flames roaring through the air. Heat seared their skin, and the acrid smell of burning metal filled their lungs. When the dust settled, Jack peeked out from behind the crates. The Deathworlders were gone, or so it seemed. But as he turned to help Lena to her feet, a shadow loomed over them. One of the creatures had survived, its armor cracked and smoking, but still intact. It stared down at them, its expression unreadable behind its visor. Jack raised his rifle, knowing it was useless. The Deathworlder didn't attack. Instead, it tilted its head, almost curiously, before stepping back and disappearing into the flames. They were alive, but for how much longer? Jack stared at the spot where the Deathworlder had vanished, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Why hadn't it killed them? After everything they'd been through, after all the bloodshed and destruction, why had the creature simply walked away? It didn't make sense. Lena groaned beside him, snapping him out of his thoughts. She was clutching her injured leg, her face pale and streaked with dirt. What now?" she asked weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. The fight had taken its toll on her, and Jack could see she was close to giving up. "We keep moving," he replied, though he wasn't sure where they were supposed to go. The facility was falling apart around them, its systems failing one by one. The air smelled of smoke and burning metal, and the distant hum of collapsing machinery echoed through the halls. They couldn't stay here. It was only a matter of time before more Deathworlders showed up. Helping Lena to her feet, Jack slung her arm over his shoulder and guided her toward the exit. Every step was agony for both of them, but neither said a word. There was no point in complaining. Survival demanded every ounce of strength they had left. As they stumbled through the wreckage, Jack noticed something odd. The remaining Deathworlders weren't pursuing them. He caught glimpses of their black armored figures in the shadows, watching silently but not attacking. It was as if they were being herded, pushed toward some unseen destination. The realization sent a chill down his spine. Whatever the enemy's plan was, it wasn't over yet. They finally reached the main entrance of the facility, where the cold vacuum of space loomed beyond the reinforced doors. Their transport ship was still docked nearby, but getting to it seemed impossible. The area was too exposed, too open, a perfect kill zone. Jack scanned the surroundings carefully, searching for any sign of movement. For now, it was quiet. "We can't stay here," Lena murmured, leaning heavily against him. Her breathing was shallow, and her skin felt clammy to the touch. If they didn't get her medical attention soon, she wouldn't last much longer. "I know," Jack said grimly. He tightened his grip on his rifle, scanning the horizon once more. Then he saw it, a lone figure emerging from the shadows. This time, the Deathworlder wasn't wearing its helmet. Its scared face was visible, its eyes sharp and calculating. In its hand, it held a small device that looked like a remote control. The creature approached slowly, stopping a few feet away. To Jack's surprise, it spoke, not in guttural growls or clicks, but in fluent Galactic standard. "You've fought well," it said, its voice calm and measured. "But your resistance is futile." Jack frowned, lowering his weapon slightly. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Why are you doing this?" The Deathworlder tilted its head, studying him with an almost curious expression. "We are tools," it said simply, "created by those who hired you. Sent here to eliminate threats. You are not our enemy. We were never meant to harm you directly." "What do you mean?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. "If you're not trying to kill us, then what do you want?" The creature paused, glancing back toward the darkened halls of the facility. "You have seen enough to understand," it said. "This mission was never about retaking the colony. It was a test, for us and for you. The Syndicate wanted to see how far mercenaries would go, how much they could endure before breaking." Jack felt anger rising in his chest. "So we're just pawns to them. Disposable pieces in their game." The Deathworlder nodded. "Yes, as are we. But unlike you, we cannot choose to walk away." For a moment, silence hung between them. Jack looked at the creature, seeing not a monster, but a victim, just like him and his team. They had all been betrayed, used, and discarded without a second thought. It was a bitter pill to swallow. "Let us go," Jack said finally, his voice firm despite the exhaustion weighing him down. "We're no threat to you anymore." The Deathworlder hesitated, then stepped aside. "Go," it said. "But remember this. The galaxy is cruel. Do not trust those who offer riches, for they will take everything you have in return." With that, the creature turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Jack and Lena alone. The way forward was clear, but the cost of their survival was etched deeply into their minds. They had made it out alive, but nothing would ever be the same again. Jack and Lena limped toward their transport ship, each step heavier than the last. The cold air of the barren moon bit at their skin, and the weight of everything they had endured pressed down on them like a physical force. Behind them, the mining facility loomed in the distance, its shattered structure a grim reminder of the horrors they had faced. For now, there were no signs of pursuit, but neither of them trusted the silence. The Deathworlders had let them go, but why? What did it mean? Reaching the ship was a small victory, but it didn't feel like one. The vessel was old and battered, just like when they had arrived, but it was still functional. Jack helped Lena climb inside, settling her into one of the seats before collapsing into the pilot's chair. His hands trembled as he powered up the engines, the hum of the systems coming to life offering a faint sense of hope. As they lifted off, Jack looked out the viewport at the desolate landscape below. The facility grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely, swallowed by the endless gray horizon. He wanted to feel relief, but instead, he felt hollow. Too many questions lingered unanswered. Why had the Syndicate sent them here? What was the true purpose of the Deathworlders? And what would happen next? Lena broke the silence first. Her voice was weak, barely audible over the low thrum of the engines. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the floor, about what really happened down there. Jack shook his head slowly. "Probably not," he admitted. "Even if we tell them, who's going to care? The Syndicate has all the power. They'll spin whatever story they want, and no one will question it." She nodded, her expression grim. "So what do we do now? Just move on. Pretend none of this ever happened?" "I don't know," Jack said honestly. "But we can't keep living like this, taking jobs without knowing the truth behind them. We're mercenaries, sure, but even we have limits." This mission crossed every line. The trip back to civilization was long and quiet. Neither of them spoke much, lost in their own thoughts. Jack replayed the events in his mind over and over, trying to make sense of it all. The Deathworlders weren't villains. They were victims, just like him. Engineered for war, used as tools, and discarded when they were no longer needed. It made him sick to think about it. When they finally docked at a nearby space station, Jack helped Lena to the medical bay. Her leg needed proper treatment, and the doctors worked quickly to stabilize her. While she rested, Jack sat alone in the waiting area, staring blankly at the wall. He should have felt relieved that they had survived, but instead, he felt burdened by guilt. Marcus and Rachel were gone, their lives sacrificed for nothing. And for what? Credits, fame, survival. A few hours later, Lena joined him, hobbling on crutches. She looked better, though her face was still pale and drawn. "What happens now?" she asked again, sitting beside him. Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We expose the truth," he said firmly. "We gather evidence, find others who've been used like us, and make people listen. The Syndicate might be powerful, but they're not untouchable." Lena raised an eyebrow. "And if they come after us? If they send more Deathworlders?" "Then we fight," Jack replied, his voice steady. "But this time, we won't be pawns. We'll be ready." For the first time in days, Lena managed a small smile. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." They left the space station together, determined to turn their pain into purpose. The galaxy was cruel, as the Deathworlder had said, but Jack and Lena vowed to fight back, not for riches or glory, but for justice. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The months that followed were difficult, but Jack and Lena refused to give up. They traveled from one corner of the galaxy to another, gathering evidence about the Syndicate's operations. It wasn't easy. Records were hidden, witnesses silenced, and trails erased. But they weren't alone anymore. Along the way, they found others who had been used by the Syndicate. Mercenaries, miners, even former scientists who had worked on Project Harvester. Together, they pieced together the truth. Jack became obsessed with exposing the Deathworlder's origins. He spent hours poring over classified files, hacking into secure systems, and interviewing anyone willing to talk. The more he learned, the angrier he grew. The Syndicate didn't just create soldiers, they created victims, pitting them against innocent people for profit. And worse, they covered it all up, leaving no trace of their crimes. Lena focused on spreading the word. She reached out to journalists, activists, and anyone with a voice loud enough to be heard. At first, no one believed them. The Syndicate was too powerful, its influence too far-reaching. But slowly, the story began to gain traction. Leaked documents surfaced online, showing the horrifying details of Project Harvester. Videos of interviews with survivors went viral, sparking outrage across the galaxy. Still, the Syndicate fought back. Assassins were sent after Jack and Lena, forcing them to stay on the move. Their allies disappeared one by one, hunted down or intimidated into silence. But Jack and Lena refused to back down. Every time they were pushed, they pushed harder. They knew the risks, but they also knew they couldn't stop. Not now. One day, they received an unexpected message. A high-ranking executive from the Syndicate wanted to meet. The terms were simple: come alone, unarmed, and without recording devices. If they agreed, the executive promised answers. Jack hesitated. It could be a trap, but it was also their best chance to get undeniable proof of the Syndicate's crimes. "We have to take it," Lena said firmly. "If we don't, this will never end." They arrived at the meeting location, a remote space station orbiting a dying star. The executive was waiting for them, his face pale and drawn. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said, his voice trembling. "The Syndicate doesn't forgive betrayal." "We're not betraying anyone," Jack shot back. "You're the ones who betrayed us. You sent us to die." The executive sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I know," he admitted, "and I'm sorry. But you need to understand. The Deathworlders aren't just weapons. They're alive, and they're angry. If the public learns the truth, they'll turn on us. And then what happens? Chaos. War." Jack clenched his fists. "Maybe that's what needs to happen," he said coldly. "Maybe the galaxy needs to see what you've done." For a long moment, the executive said nothing. Then he handed Jack a data chip. "Everything's on here," he whispered. "Every experiment, every mission, every life destroyed. Use it wisely." Before Jack could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. The Syndicate had found them. "Go," the executive shouted, shoving them toward the exit. "Now." Jack and Lena ran, clutching the data chip tightly. Behind them, the executive stayed behind, his fate uncertain. As their ship lifted off, Jack glanced back at the station. Explosions tore through its hull, consuming everything inside. They had the proof they needed, but the fight was far from over. The Syndicate wouldn't stop until they were silenced or dead. But Jack and Lena had made their choice. They would keep fighting, no matter the cost. Because sometimes the only way to survive was to fight back, and they intended to do just that.